The desert evening carried a weight that pressed down on Elias Mercer's shoulders as he rode the fence-line, the air brittle with dust and the faint metallic scent of rain that would never come. His ranch stretched wide but thin, the earth cracked, fences sagging under neglect. He had patched and repatched until the posts leaned like weary men, yet the land gave little back. Debt collectors had begun circling like vultures, and though he told himself he still owned this ground, the truth gnawed at him. His life had shrunk to scraps of soil, empty barns, and silence. The silence was the worst. It carried echoes of his wife's laughter, echoes he tried to bury in chores and whiskey, but they always came back at dusk. Tonight, as shadows thickened, he hunched deeper into his coat and urged his horse forward, determined to finish the ride before dark. That was when he saw it, something staggering along the arroyo's edge, a shape too raw to be mistaken for anything else. Mustang. Its coat was streaked with blood, dark rivulets matting the hide, the proud frame reduced to a trembling outline. The animal limped, every step torn from will alone. Elias reined in hard, heart punching against ribs. Wild horses had never brought him anything but grief. One had trampled his father years back, leaving a scar in memory he never forgave. He should have turned away, should have left the creature to the coyotes. Yet he didn't. He watched the Mustang lift its head, and for a moment their eyes met. Not defiance, not the untamed fire Mustangs were known for, but something stripped bare, pleading. Against reason, Elias dismounted. His boots crunched over gravel, the air dry as bone. "Easy," he muttered, though the word felt foreign on his tongue. The Mustang's sides heaved, its legs buckled, but it lurched forward again, dragging itself toward the horizon. Elias frowned. This wasn't the random wandering of a dying beast. The animal was trying to go somewhere, even if it tore itself apart in the process. He should have walked away. Every part of his weary body told him that. But there was a pull, quiet yet insistent, that tightened with each stagger the horse made. He dropped the reins of his own mount and followed, rifle slung across his back, boots grinding through sand. His heart ticked uneasily, caught between caution and curiosity. The Mustang stumbled, went down on one knee, then forced itself upright with a groan of breath. Elias swore under his breath, anger flaring, not at the horse but at the absurdity of it all. A broken animal dragging him away from what little duty remained. Still his feet kept moving. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself. The desert darkened as the sun slipped, leaving only a bruised sky. Wind whispered through brittle mesquite, and the land stretched out in lifeless folds. Then, as the last of daylight sank, Elias saw it. Ahead, half hidden by dunes and time, stood a shack. The roof sagged inward, boards gray with age, the windows black pits. A structure long abandoned, left to rot in silence. The Mustang collapsed at its threshold, legs folding in surrender, sides shuddering as if it had spent its final strength reaching this point. Elias halted, chest tightening. His pulse throbbed in his temples, an unease spreading through him. What business did a horse have dragging him to this forgotten place? He glanced once behind him. His land lost in the dusk, a line of broken fence posts fading from sight. Ahead, the shack waited, mute and unyielding. The Mustang's breath rasped against the sand, shallow but determined, as though it had fulfilled some unspoken duty. Elias stood between the two paths, one leading back to the hollow shell of a ranch, the other into mystery. He stepped forward, boots crunching across the threshold where the Mustang lay, and the sound of the door groaning open in the night set his skin on edge. What lay inside was still hidden, but already he knew, whatever waited there would not let him leave unchanged. The door sagged inward on rusted hinges, releasing a breath of air so stale Elias nearly gagged. Dust billowed in faint ribbons, stirred by his intrusion. He held his lantern aloft, its glow carving thin paths through the gloom. The shack was small, a single room at first glance, though the shadows clung to its corners like secrets reluctant to be seen. Floorboards warped under his boots, creaking softly, as though whispering warnings from the past. His eyes adjusted. The space bore the unmistakable marks of habitation, though time had reduced them to relics. A bunk leaned crooked against one wall, its mattress little more than stuffing spilling like dried weeds. Above it, nailed to the boards, hung objects that should not have endured. A framed photograph clouded with dust, a patch of faded military insignia, and beside them a rusting tin cup. Elias stepped closer, drawn by recognition. The photograph showed a young man in uniform, proud yet weary, his hand resting on the shoulder of a woman with gentle eyes. They had once stood here, he thought, before the desert swallowed them whole. A sound behind him snapped his attention. The Mustang collapsed at the doorway, wheezing shallowly but not silent. Its head nudged forward, eyes flicking toward a corner of the room. Elias frowned, following the gaze. There, covered by a frayed tarp, rested a wooden trunk, its iron fittings corroded but still intact. Something in his chest stirred, the pulse of curiosity that overrode caution. He crouched, fingers prying the lid open. The hinges resisted, then gave way with a groan. Inside lay objects carefully preserved, as though someone had sealed them away with the intent of remembrance. Journals bound in cracked leather, stacks of yellowing letters tied with twine, and atop them a small silver locket. Elias lifted it gently, the tarnish cold against his skin. He thumbed it open. Inside were two portraits, one of the uniformed man from the wall, the other of the same woman, their faces young, full of promise. For a long moment, Elias forgot the desert, forgot his own ruin. He saw a life built here, carved from hardship much like his own attempt at survival. Only these people had left behind fragments of themselves, whereas he had buried his wife's letters deep in a drawer, unable to face them. He set the locket down with reverence and reached for the journals. The handwriting sprawled in faded ink. The soldier wrote of battles, of comrades lost, of nights spent listening to coyotes just beyond firelight. He wrote of a horse, fierce and loyal, scarred but unbroken. Elias's throat tightened as he turned a page. There were descriptions of feeding the animal when rations grew thin, of promising it that one day they would both return home. He closed the journal, palms damp. The Mustang outside bore scars, weathered the same way the soldier described. A chill crept up Elias's spine. The silence broke again, sharper this time. Coyotes howled beyond the shack, their voices sharp against the emptiness. The Mustang's ears twitched, its body tensing though it could hardly stand. Elias rose, rifle in hand, stepping to the doorway. Shadows flickered just beyond the lantern's reach, eyes glowing faint in the dark. He fired a warning shot into the air. The echoes cracked across the desert, sending the pack scattering, but his own pulse thundered long after the sound faded. He returned inside, chest still heaving. The shack felt heavier now, as if the walls bore witness to his intrusion. He sat by the trunk again, searching deeper, and found a false bottom wedged beneath the letters. With effort he pried it loose. Folded there was a brittle map, inked with fading lines. At its center, marked with a crude red cross, lay a place far beyond the canyon's reach. Elias traced the symbol with a finger, the Mustang's ragged breathing filling the silence behind him. The realization pressed cold and steady into his mind. This horse had carried more than wounds. It had carried a purpose, a story older than his own grief, and it had led him here to place that burden in his hands. He looked toward the doorway where the Mustang lay, its body trembling, yet its gaze still fixed on him as if demanding recognition. He clenched the map, a shiver crawling down his spine. Whatever waited at that red cross, he would have to decide whether to follow. Elias sat in the silence of the shack, the brittle map trembling in his hands. His instinct told him to leave it be, to walk away before he became tangled in someone else's ghosts. He had his own burdens, enough to choke a man. Yet the weight of the Mustang's eyes, unwavering and insistent, kept him rooted. The animal had bled itself nearly dry to reach this place. That kind of persistence wasn't chance. It was will, sharpened by memory. Elias closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, allowed himself to imagine that perhaps fate still had a hand in his story. At dawn he tore strips of leather from his saddlebags and fashioned a crude splint for the horse's leg. The Mustang flinched but did not fight him, as if it had accepted Elias's touch as necessary. "You're stubborn," he muttered, tightening the bindings. The horse's ear flicked, a small acknowledgement. It was the first moment of unspoken trust between them, and it stirred something Elias thought long buried. He had not tended to another living thing with such care since his wife had fallen ill. With the map folded into his pocket, Elias led the Mustang from the shack, the desert opening before them. Each step was deliberate, the horse leaning heavily on its good leg, Elias steadying it with a firm hand against its neck. The silence of the land pressed around them, broken only by their shared breath. Hours passed, the sun crawling higher, its heat relentless. Elias spoke aloud, partly to break the silence, partly to convince himself he had not lost his mind. He told the Mustang of the drought, of the bank letters piling up on his kitchen table, of the night his wife whispered promises of spring while fever consumed her. His voice cracked, but the Mustang did not falter. It listened, ears turning as if every word carried weight. By midday the desert turned cruel. Wind gathered sand into whirling veils, cutting at skin and choking lungs. Elias pulled his bandana tight across his face, shielding the horse as best he could beneath a canyon overhang. They huddled together, storm shrieking like 1,000 voices. The fury outside dragged Elias backward into memory, into the night he had failed to fetch medicine in time, trapped by floodwaters as his wife slipped away. Guilt surged, raw and familiar, yet the horse pressed closer, its body heat grounding him. He clutched its mane and whispered through clenched teeth, "I won't fail you. Not this time." When the storm finally relented, the world lay reshaped. Sand dunes shifted like restless seas, yet the map guided him still. He and the Mustang emerged battered but unbroken, stepping into a hollow tucked deep within the canyon's arms. Here the earth seemed softer, overgrown with desert grass, as if the land itself guarded the secret. Elias knelt, hands clawing at the soil where the red cross marked. Beneath layers of sand and stone, his fingers struck wood. Heart hammering, he unearthed a small sealed box, its lid marked by time but not destroyed. He forced it open. Inside, protected by oilskin, lay medals glinting faintly, a bundle of letters bound with faded ribbon, and photographs of the soldier and his family. One image stopped him cold, the soldier standing proudly with a young Mustang by his side, its coat unscarred, its eyes bright with the same fierce spark Elias had seen in the horse that now stood trembling behind him. Elias lowered the photograph slowly, throat constricting. The journals had been true. The horse had outlived its master, carrying not only scars but a duty, a memory no human had come to claim. And now it had led him, a man broken in his own right, to bear witness. The Mustang nudged his shoulder, breath warm against his skin. Elias looked into its dark, weary eyes and felt something shift inside him. This was no accident, no wandering beast. This was a messenger of loyalty, of promises that refused to die. He closed the box carefully, clutching it to his chest. The desert was silent again, but he knew it would not remain so. He sensed trials still waiting, shadows circling just beyond the edge of sight. Night settled over the hollow, cloaking Elias and the Mustang in a stillness broken only by the crackle of a small fire. The box of medals and letters rested near his boots, its presence heavy as stone. He studied the soldier's handwriting again, tracing words written decades ago. The final entry lingered. "If I fall, my horse will remember. He will carry my story home." Elias's chest ached as he read it aloud, voice low, almost reverent. The Mustang lifted its head at the sound, ears twitching as though it understood. For the first time in years, Elias felt the hollow within him stir with something more than grief, something close to purpose. Coyotes shattered the silence, their howls rolling down from the ridges. Elias's hand closed over his rifle, heart pounding with the instinct of a man unwilling to surrender what had been entrusted to him. Shadows darted near the firelight, eyes glinting in the dark. The Mustang struggled to its feet, legs trembling, a defiant snort rattling from its chest. Elias stepped forward, planting himself between the animal and the shifting shapes. "Not tonight," he muttered. His finger tightened, shots cracked, echoing through stone walls. The pack scattered, but two lingered, pacing just beyond the glow. Elias stoked the fire higher, flames licking the night, daring them closer. In defending the horse, he felt as if he were defending every memory he had failed to keep safe before. When dawn came, the coyotes had vanished, leaving only the faint tracks of their retreat. Elias's limbs ached, his eyes heavy, but something inside him felt steadier than it had in years. He buried the soldier's box beneath a cairn of stones, marking it with care. The medals, the letters, the photographs, all laid to rest where the earth might guard them, no longer forgotten, no longer lost to sand. Yet he kept one thing, the photograph of the soldier with the young Mustang. It felt less like theft and more like inheritance, as though the man's story had fused with his own. The journey back to his ranch was slow, the Mustang limping but no longer collapsing. Elias walked beside it, reins slack, his hand brushing the coarse mane. He spoke less now, yet the silence felt companionable. When his land finally stretched before him, its fences crooked and soil barren, he saw it differently, not as ruin, but as ground that might still be mended. He thought of his wife's grave beneath the cottonwood, of the promises he had left unspoken. Carrying the photograph close, he knew he could not keep burying himself beside her memory. Days passed. Elias worked with a vigor unfamiliar to him, patching fences, hauling water, planting what seeds he had left. The Mustang lingered near, healing slowly, its strength returning. Neighbors who had long written him off began to notice. They offered quiet nods, small gestures of respect. Word spread of the wild horse that refused to leave his side. Children came to the fence, wide-eyed, whispering that it looked like something born from legend. Elias let them look, though his hand never left the scarred hide, protective as if guarding more than an animal. One evening, when the sky blazed with colors that seemed pulled from another world, Elias saddled the Mustang. The scars across its flank gleamed faintly in the dying light. He climbed into the saddle, unsure if the horse would bear him. Yet when he leaned forward, it lifted its head high, muscles coiling with renewed power. Together they rode across the land, wind tearing through the silence, dust rising like a banner behind them. For the first time in years, Elias did not feel chained to grief. He felt carried, as though the horse bore not just his weight but his story, his redemption. At the edge of his property, he reined in, gazing across the horizon. The desert stretched endless and golden, alive in its silence. He touched the photograph tucked in his coat, then rested his hand against the Mustang's neck. "We're not done," he whispered. The horse's ear flicked in reply, steady, resolute. The sun sank lower, shadows long and soft, and Elias realized that scars, whether on man or beast, were not signs of defeat. They were proof of survival, of stories carried forward when memory alone was not enough. With that truth burning in him, he turned the Mustang back toward home, a new chapter unfolding in the quiet rhythm of hoofbeats against the desert floor.